Martin Calhoun was 62 years old, a retired Marine with eyes that had witnessed too much. His silver hair was still trimmed in regulation style, and he walked with the limp of someone who had left parts of himself behind on foreign soil. For 8 years, his constant companion had been Shadow, a Belgian Malinois, with alert eyes and a graying muzzle, wearing a vest clearly labeled "Service Dog Do Not Pet." Shadow wasn't just a helper, he was essential. He detected Martin's oncoming PTSD episodes before even Martin could tell. The dog was trained to apply gentle pressure to Martin's leg when his breathing shifted or his hands began to shake, small but crucial acts that stopped many public breakdowns. On this particular Tuesday, Martin entered the Bayview Grill, a modest seafood spot known for its specials. He asked for a quiet corner, away from heavy foot traffic. Shadow lay calmly beneath the table, perfectly still between Martin's boots, nearly invisible to other patrons. A young server smiled as she delivered water and a menu, but her face changed the moment she noticed Shadow. Without saying a word, she turned and walked quickly toward the back office. Moments later, a man in his 30s wearing a manager's badge approached. His expression was stiff with disapproval. "Sir, we have a strict no-animal policy here," he announced, loud enough for other tables to catch. Martin looked up steadily. "Shadow isn't a pet, he's a service dog," he said, pulling out his certification papers. The manager dismissed the document with a wave. "Policies are policies. We have to follow health regulations, and some guests might feel uneasy." From a nearby table, a woman in large designer sunglasses nodded in support. "Exactly. A dog is a dog, Marine or not," she said to her companion, making sure Martin could hear. Tension thickened in the air. Diners stopped mid-bite, pretending to focus on their meals while eyeing the unfolding scene. Martin glanced down at Shadow, who didn't move. He was trained not to react to stress in his handler's tone. After a pause, Martin lifted his eyes to the manager. "This dog dragged me from a burning truck and shielded me under enemy fire," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving him because someone finds him inconvenient." The manager folded his arms. "Then you know what you need to do." Martin rose slowly, dignity intact despite the insult. Shadow stood in flawless sync beside him, never straying from his handler's side as they exited, eyes following them from every direction. Outside, an elderly couple who had seen it all walked past them quickly, heads low in silent respect. The husband briefly met Martin's eyes, a flicker of understanding, but said nothing. They'd been raised not to draw attention. Near the entrance, a group of college students stood gathered. One of them subtly recorded the moment on his phone. "Look at this old guy, thinks his emotional support mutt's in special ops or something," one joked. "Probably just another PTSD case making up stories," his friend laughed. "My cousin's got an anxiety guinea pig. Maybe it needs a camo vest too." Martin heard every word, but didn't break stride. His jaw tensed, but he'd faced worse ridicule in Afghanistan than from some sidewalk camera cowboys. He crossed the street and sat down on a bench facing the restaurant. From his jacket, he pulled out a sandwich he'd bought earlier, tuna on wheat. With familiar care, he split it in two and handed half to Shadow. "Not what I promised you, boy, but it'll have to do," he muttered. Shadow accepted it gently, chewing with the focus of a trained dog, eyes flicking back up to Martin constantly. After a while, Martin took out his wallet and slid free a time-worn photograph in a plastic sleeve. It showed a younger Martin, bloodied on a stretcher, half awake. Shadow, with darker fur than, stood alert at his side, his coat stained possibly with his handler's blood. Around Shadow's neck hung the dog tags of Bravo Unit's K-9 Division, deployed in Afghanistan's Helmand province. He'd earned medals some men never would. People passed by, unaware of the quiet grief between the man and his dog, missing the blend of pain and surrender in Martin's gaze. "Kicked out again, huh, Shadow?" he whispered, slipping the photo back. Shadow responded by laying his head softly on Martin's knee, the same gesture whether they were overseas or in a public park. Loyalty didn't know geography. A young mother rushed her curious child past, muttering warnings about strange men with dogs. Martin pretended not to notice, He was used to being seen as part mystery, part threat. He checked his watch. Nearly time for Shadow's meds. The blast that tore up Martin's leg had embedded shrapnel in Shadow too. They shared pain management like they shared everything else. As they sat, a city bus rolled by. On its side, an ad read, "Honor our heroes. They protected your freedom." Martin gave a short breath of irony. Shadow couldn't speak, but he'd saved lives. He never abandoned his handler, not to bullets, not to judgment. "If you believe a four-legged soldier deserves respect too," typed Shadow. 2 hours later, inside Bayview Grill, the lunch crowd was thinning when the door opened. 5 men in marine dress blues entered with exact precision. They didn't glance at the seating board or look for menus. They moved directly toward the front. Talk faded. A child pointed. A businessman paused his call mid-word. At the front, the lead Marine, a captain with the name Jacobs on his uniform, stepped up and presented his military ID. "I'm Captain Alex Jacobs, commanding officer of Bravo Unit, 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion. I'm looking for Martin Calhoun and his service dog, Shadow." The manager appeared from the back, paling at the sight of the uniforms. They left," he stammered, suddenly noticing multiple phones pointed his way. Captain Jacobs didn't flinch, but his voice rang clearly. "Mr. Calhoun pulled 4 of my men from an ambush near Kandahar. His dog, Shadow, has more confirmed rescues than many trained medics. Shadow is listed as a sergeant in our unit records and has received the Navy and Marine Corps Medal." He paused, letting the room absorb it. "And your restaurant just refused a seat to an American hero." No one spoke. The woman who had remarked about military dogs stared into her water glass, her cheeks flushed red. A server paused mid-stride, the pitcher of water still tilted. One of the Marines raised his phone. "We're sending out an internal alert to our veteran support network, statewide 15,000 members, just so they're aware of how veterans are being treated here." The manager stepped closer, palms up. "There's clearly been a mix-up we didn't realize." "That's the issue, sir," Captain Jacobs interjected. "You shouldn't have to know a man's record to treat him with basic respect." The Marines didn't shout. They didn't demand anything. Captain Jacobs quietly placed a framed photograph on the counter. Shadow in full combat gear with his unit, the word brother etched beneath it, then turned to go. As they walked out, some diners turned to the windows where Martin and Shadow sat quietly in an old truck across the street, unaware of what had just happened. The youngest waitress, a college student who had silently watched everything earlier, grabbed a takeout box from under the counter. She quickly packed it with the day's special, added a slice of pie, and stepped outside. She walked briskly to Martin's truck, offering the box with a handwritten note tucked into the twine. "We were wrong. Let us try to make this right." Martin looked at her, then at the restaurant where people now crowded the windows, watching. After a brief pause, he accepted the package with a nod. Not one of forgiveness, not quite condemnation, just a quiet recognition that someone was trying to fix something. As the girl turned to leave, she heard him speak softly to Shadow. "What do you think, pal? Should we give them another shot?" The dog's tail thumped once a soldier's reply to a possible ceasefire. A week later, a new sign appeared in the Bayview Grill's window. "We proudly welcome all veterans and their service companions." Below it hung a framed image of military working dogs across American wars, from World War II to modern-day Afghanistan. The local veteran group hosted a brief ceremony outside the restaurant, awarding Shadow an honorary medal. It read, "Four-legged warrior above and beyond." Shadow sat at strict attention the whole time, only shifting when Martin gave the release signal. Children from a nearby elementary school had sent hand-drawn cards thanking Martin and Shadow for their service. One little boy approached, glancing up at Martin. "Does he know what it means when people say thank you?" the boy asked, pointing toward Shadow. Martin slowly knelt despite his stiff knee. "He doesn't need words," he replied. "He just needs to be near people who remember what he's done." The restaurant's manager resigned the day after the Marine's visit. He left behind a handwritten message for the owner. Thank you for showing me what the law books couldn't. Respect isn't about rules, it's about recognizing someone's worth. The owner, whose father had served in Vietnam, implemented required training for all staff covering service animals and the ADA. More importantly, she organized monthly community dinners, giving local veterans a space to share their experiences. Martin and Shadow became regulars again, always seated at the same corner table now marked with a small U.S. flag and a plaque that read, "Martin Shadow Bravo Team Never Forgotten." One evening, the student who had filmed the confrontation approached their table. His phone was in hand, but not recording. "I deleted that video," he said awkwardly. "And, I just wanted to say my brother enlisted last week. I guess I'd want folks to treat him with respect too." He faltered, the words hanging. Martin extended a hand. "Then be that person, now, for others." Shadow was still sharp on duty even with age. One afternoon a car backfired outside the window. Martin's hands trembled instantly. Shadow pressed firmly against his leg. The nearby customers didn't glance over, not out of discomfort but out of a learned respect for privacy. Captain Jacobs's unit redeployed 3 months later. Before they shipped out, they presented Martin with a unit coin, a rare gesture for someone not currently serving. He kept it close in the same pocket as the photograph symbols of Brotherhood that lasted beyond deployment. On quiet nights, Martin and Shadow could be found on their porch, staring out toward the horizon. Their silence spoke volumes. Memories of burning sands, sudden explosions, and the sharp, almost whistle of bullets coming too close. But it also held peace, the kind that comes when people remember their responsibility to those who served, even if it takes someone in uniform to remind them. Not every uniformed person is a hero, but anyone who stands up for a fellow soldier, even one with 4 legs, is no coward. You might forget this moment in a day or two, but if no one retells it, history stays silent.